All right. Uh, Welcome back to This Week in Privacy, everyone. It's been a little while since we've done one of these. This is our weekly series. Well, it's going to be our weekly series, hopefully, where we cover the latest updates with what we're working on in the Privacy Guides community and this week's top stories in data privacy and cybersecurity. Um, I'm Jonah. I hosted these a while ago when we tested this out. I think it was last year, last summer we ended this. And I'm joined today by Jordan as well, who's been working on some great video content here on this channel that we'll talk about in a bit. For those of you who don't know what we do yet, Privacy Guides is a nonprofit which researches and shares privacy related information, especially like digital privacy and personal consumer privacy. And we facilitate a community on our forum and Matrix and other spaces where people can ask questions and get advice about staying private online and preserving their digital rights. I think we have a lot of good news and stuff to talk about this week, so I'm pretty excited about this show. Thanks for joining, everyone. And I think we'll kick it off with what we've been working on at privacyguides.org lately. So a big thing that we've been working on is more videos and article content, and I'd love to hand this over to Jordan to kind of introduce themselves. You've heard them before on this channel in some of the latest videos, and I'd love for them to talk a bit more about the latest videos that they've been putting out here. So, Jordan, here you go.
Thanks, Joan. I really appreciate that introduction. So I guess everyone here is probably pretty familiar with me, at least on this channel. So I'm the person that works on the video content here at Privacy Guides. And I guess I can talk a little bit about the last video that we put out just last week, and that's the Clipper chip video, which I think was really an important topic to cover to like sort of base everyone's knowledge in the history of encryption and how it has been restricted by governments. So that was a really important video that I think should be quite an important bit of knowledge that people can use to like understand the whole like scope of encryption being restricted. So I hope you all enjoyed that video. And I guess I'll transition here into moving into the videos that I'm currently working on. So, currently in the pipeline, we have a review of Secure Blue, which is a Linux distribution that recently got added to the website. So, look out for that. That's coming soon. But that's sort of like what the video project pipeline is looking like right now. So, I'll just hand it back to you, Jonah.
I think maybe we might be encountering our first technical problem because I've seen a couple people say that they can hear me twice. Jordan, you might have to look at that.
I think I fixed it.
Or there's an echo.
It's fixed.
All right. Let me know, uh, one of you in the chat if it sounds
Yes.
better.
Sorry, everybody. This is like, yeah, first time doing this, so trying our best here.
Yeah, been a
Thanks for the
while.
feedback.
I'm just gonna assume it's good until I see someone confirm. So I'll move on to some other stuff that we've been working on. M is another new team member at Privacy Guides. New since the last video. It's been like half a year now, but she's been putting out a lot of great articles on our website. The latest article that she published was a dive into dating apps and kind of like the privacy problems with those, and kind of some information about who you trust with the intimate data that you would share on those kind of apps. It's really interesting, so definitely check out that article. We've also been publishing more tutorials. Justin from Magic Grants just was a guest post on our blog and published an article about running a Monero server on TrueNAS, so you can kind of take more personal control over that kind of stuff if you're interested in self-hosting. So a lot of content like that coming out. Otherwise, it's been somewhat of a slow week at Privacy Guides, but there's all sorts of stuff that's coming out in the future. So hopefully we'll be able to talk more about that soon. Um, but I think that's kind of where we're at with site updates for this week. So we can probably move on to news. What do you think, Jordan?
Yeah, that sounds good. Let's let's jump right into the news.
Is there an article that you think we should talk about first?
Yes, so let's start with the first article on our list, which is from Ars Technica, and it is about a provider of covert surveillance apps spills passwords for 62,000 users. So, just quoting the article here, the maker of a phone app that is advertised as providing a stealthy means for monitoring all activities on an Android device spilled email addresses, plain text passwords, and other sensitive data belonging to 62,000 users, a researcher discovered recently. A security flaw in the app, branded Cat Watchful, allowed researcher Eric Daigle to download a trove of sensitive data, which belonged to account holders who used the covert app to monitor phones. The leak, made possible by a SQL injection vulnerability, allowed anyone who exploited it to access the accounts and all data stored in them. The Catful Watch creators emphasize the app's stealth and security, while the promoters claim the app is legal and intended for parents monitoring their children's online activities. The emphasis on stealth has raised concerns that it's being aimed at people with other agendas. So, just quoting the article there, other stalkerware apps have been implicated in similar data breaches. If you're being surveilled by a family member or a partner, you may be at increased risk for these data leaks as well. So that's sort of the first article that we've got in our list here. I think it's also pretty important to mention, like, you can remove these like stalkerware apps. So like, if you think you might have one of these apps installed on your device, it's definitely worth like having a check to see if you have one of these implicated apps, because you can remove them from your device.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to talk more about this. I do hear some people saying the echo might be back. So I don't know if the OBS scene
Okay, I think we're good.
is
Sorry.
different.
Yeah.
All right. We'll check that out. Um, yeah, that's definitely something that you should take a look at and remove. Is this one of those apps that like parents would use it to like kind of track what their children are doing, so you might not know that you have it installed or that kind of thing. But these apps are commonly abused and um, like even outside of that situation. And checking like your device administrators or like profiles that you might have installed on your device is really important because these kind of apps that track what you're doing and track what you enter can get some pretty sensitive information about yourself. So it's crazy stuff.
Definitely, yeah. We definitely have a check of that article if you're interested. We'll make sure to link it in the official blog post for this live stream. But with that being said, Jonah, do you want to take the next story here?
Yeah, I think it'd be good to move on if you wouldn't mind to kind of our bigger story that we mentioned in the title. Might as well cover that if you want to pull up that Australians to face age checks from search engines from Information Age.
Yep,
Um,
we got it up.
all right. So I'll quote a bit of the article here. Australians using search engines will logged into accounts from the likes of Google and Microsoft are going to have their age checked by the end of 2025 under a new online safety code co-developed by technology companies and registered by the e-Safety Commissioner. Search engines operating in Australia will need to implement age assurance technologies for logged-in users in no later than 6 months under the new rules that are published on Monday. Um, so this is a really interesting story because Australia's kind of written these new rules that are requiring search engines to implement this age verification for anyone who's logged in. Um, I, I I see that non-account users won't be affected by this, while account holders may need to submit government ID, which is really interesting to me. But they may need to either do that or undergo biometric identification to estimate age, or have their browser activity examined by AI that can kind of infer their age. And this is planned to be enforced by the end of the year, like I said, so within 6 months. These codes were co-authored by the Digital Industry Group Inc. in Australia, which is a trade association which includes Google, Microsoft, and Yahoo as members. And we've talked about age verification on privacy guides and on this channel before, and it's really dangerous stuff because not only is it very invasive, um, in terms of like requiring a lot of personal identification to verify your age and that kind of thing, but it can also be used and weaponized to kind of restrict content um, from being accessed by certain groups or certain people, even regardless of their age. Because once you build in these restrictions, they can be used for so many different purposes, and it's a real danger to online privacy that a lot of countries are kind of barreling towards these days. Um, did you see anything else in this article that stuck out to you, Jordan?
I think like the main thing to like take from this sort of thing is like a lot of governments are trying to do this, but like in a lot of ways there's really been no like definitive method for actually verifying people's ages that would respect people's privacy. Like this is just going to restrict people's access to things. And people who are over the age that they're requiring to access things will have to submit their ID or use like these biometric systems. So I think like when we think about it like that, it's going to impact the majority of people because now certain websites are going to stop allowing access and they're going to have to use these age verification systems, which in a lot of ways, like there's currently no way to do that in a private way. Like you have to submit your ID or like do a facial recognition scan, and those sort of services aren't respecting people's privacy. So this is definitely very concerning to see, especially from the Australian government, which I personally don't like this move towards. So yeah.
Yeah. It's really interesting to me how they are not requiring this for like people who aren't logged in. I see that it says users who aren't logged in are going to have certain search engine results removed and have like images blurred and stuff. All of this is aimed, of course, at preventing children from accessing online pornography and that sort of stuff. But you always see with these systems that the things that some people consider adult content might not be considered adult content by other people, and to access that information, basically whatever the Australian government deems to be adult content, whether it is or not, is going to, if you want to see it at all, you're going to be not only required to verify your age, but you're going to be required to make a Google account and sign up with these tech companies, and that is going to invade your privacy in many ways as well as they build like a profile about you. So it's bad all around, and um, of course it doesn't make a lot of sense. But if this is something that like if anyone in Australia is watching, you should definitely try and speak out about this and try and get this changed because it is a bit of a slippery slope once these technologies start being developed in countries. Other governments are going to see this sort of thing and they're going to demand that Google and Microsoft and other companies implement this in front of their apps and for all of their accounts as well. So it's good to stop it right out of the bat, is what I would kind of end this on. But it's pretty bad news from Australia from what I see so far.
Definitely, yeah. So I think now we've sort of covered that article, we can move on to another one on our list here. And this one comes from notebookcheck.net. And this specific article is about the Fairphone 6, which previously was only available in Europe and is now coming to the United States through Marina, which is like the device portion of the E Foundation. And
Hmm.
I guess I'll just quote from the article here. Um, the Fairphone 6 was announced in Europe in late June as the latest iteration of Fairphone's sustainable smartphone. Unfortunately, as has been the case with previous models, Fairphone doesn't officially sell the phone in North America. Nevertheless, there's a way for those in the US to get their hands on Fairphone smartphones. The Fairphone 6 is available in the US through Marina, the company known for selling de-googled versions of select Android smartphones and tablets. This means that the version of the Fairphone 6 available through the retailer will ship with EOS, just like the version of the Pixel tablet it announced earlier this year. So I think like this is good, right? Like the ability to have a sort of repairable, sustainable smartphone like available everywhere is quite good, right? And I think that the ability for Marina to be able to offer this to people in the United States is great. But I guess my main concern with this is how would this work with parts and stuff like that. So there's definitely some concerns from people who um, are thinking of buying this. Like, is there going to be the same support because it's not actually supported by Fairphone in particular? Like, Marina is a partner of Fairphone, but will there be the same amount of support for those devices? Is definitely what I'm hearing from people in the community.
Yeah, for sure. It's always hard to recommend these like very regionally focused products like Fairphone, which has never really been fully available in the EU. I know that this isn't the first time Murena has sold the Fairphone previous versions in the US, and I don't know off the top of my head what their track record is in terms of that repairability and warranty support. Um, but it was always a phone with limited compatibility, and of course, if you're buying it through Murena, it's going to come with EOS, which is a pretty controversial topic within the privacy guides community. It's not very highly recommended because they don't do a lot of the security and privacy hardening, especially security hardening that other Android operating systems do. They they basically just they're redistributing an operating system with kind of open source apps, standard ones like Nextcloud and that kind of thing. But so from like in terms of a Google replacement, that could be useful. But in terms of all the other privacy and security features, they kind of fall short of the other custom Android operating systems we would recommend. And when you pair this with an $8.99 price in the US from this company, it is a really tough sell when you can get like an A series Pixel for significantly cheaper and run a more secure operating system. So I don't know if repairability is like going to be enough to kind of sell these phones, to be honest. And I don't, especially, yeah, I guess we'd have to look into um, how getting those parts and repairing these phones actually even works in the US if you're buying it through this third party instead of from Fairphone themselves. Um, I see in the article they say they don't have any parts for the Fairphone 6 yet, but they do sell some parts for the Fairphone 4. So it is possible that they will do that as well. But at that $8.99 price, I just am not personally sure who it makes sense for, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think especially like a lot of people will be sort of disappointed for 8.99. Like the specifications of the device, like they don't really meet that price point. Especially like you said, you can get like an A series Pixel, even a brand new one, for like a lot cheaper than that, and you're going to be able to run a lot of like what we recommend, like a custom operating system, and that's sort of like a big um, value for people. So I don't think the 8.99 price tag. It's a sustainable like repairable smartphone, but um, I'm not sure if that value is there for people, especially people who are more concerned about their security.
Yeah, another interesting thing about EOS is it seems like they aren't really supporting the Pixel series that other operating systems like, of course, Graphene OS and Calyx OS that you'll see talked about in these communities support. They focus a lot on the Fairphone like this one and the Nothing CMF phone one, which I don't know much about, but they haven't supported even the Pixel 9 series yet, um, which definitely could be uh, just in reaction to most Pixel users installing other operating systems like Graphene OS instead of EOS. So maybe they're trying to differentiate their product based on like hardware, since the Fairphone is a lot less commonly supported. Um, but I don't know if the EOS, Foundation, like ecosystem is something that people here will necessarily want to buy into, so it might not make a lot of sense.
Yeah, there's definitely like, since there are so many like individual services that people can use, like that sort of ecosystem is less appealing, especially when there are so many like good options, individual options that you can consider than like sort of the Foundation ecosystem. So I
Hmm.
don't know. I think it's definitely still interesting that this has warranted enough like interest for them to bring it to the US, because yeah, it's definitely an interesting idea. So something we're definitely keeping an eye on, but it's not something that we're recommending currently, is it?
Yeah. Well, speaking of these custom Android operating systems, I think we should talk about this next article from Android Authority, which I know has been pretty controversial in recent weeks. I'll go ahead and read the original article first, and then I know Graphene OS has posted some stuff in response to this. But the Android Authority headline is Cops in this country think everyone using a Google Pixel must be a drug dealer. So I'll start the article here. Police in Spain, specifically in the autonomous region of Catalonia, are very alert when they spot someone using a Google Pixel phone. As weird as it sounds, Pixels are highly preferred by those involved in organized crime, according to the Catalan police. Um, so there's a quote from a police official here. Every time we see a Google Pixel, we suspect it might belong to a drug dealer, said a police official leading the anti-drug operation in Catalonia. As per X-Taka Android, Zataka Android, I don't know what news source that is. But why are pixels popular among criminals in that region? It really has little to do with how Google makes its phones and everything to do with the open nature of Android, which lets users use alternative operating systems. Specifically, again, according to the police, organized crime members in Catalonia are using Graphene OS, which is a privacy and security focused operating system that keeps your data out of Google's reach. Um, of course, all of this is really interesting. We've recommended Graphene OS in terms of protecting your privacy and security for a long time, and it's pretty widely recommended by other cybersecurity and privacy experts as well. Um, so for it to be a red flag is very worrying, because it's the kind of thing that in Spain right now, and probably in other police agencies around the world who haven't like commented on this publicly, people are going to use the fact that you're trying to protect your privacy and security as kind of an excuse to target you specifically for heightened surveillance, which is of course never good. I see an update to this article at the top. Um, they say that the crew behind Graphene OS is understandably none too pleased about their good name being dragged through the mud, and members are speaking out about these reports from Spain. So one of their uh, official posts on X says that European authoritarians and their enablers in the media are misrepresenting Graphene OS and even Pixel phones as if they're something for criminals. Graphene OS is opposed to the mass surveillance police state that these people want to impose on everyone. And that statement from Graphene OS is kind of where I was going with that whole conversation earlier as well, because it is it is something that people are like police states and other authoritarian governments are going to use this as an excuse to target people. And it really makes no sense because there are so many legitimate uses for this. Graphene OS is a tool that can be used by anyone. Um, and somehow I've accidentally closed my notes. Oops.
I guess like a thing where we can relate this to is like sort of governments taking offense to people like even using tools that, have legitimate use cases, like, having Signal installed on your phone. Like that's just a messaging app. Like that's not like, you're not saying that you have something to hide. This is sort of a tool that you can use. Like I think sort of like saying that everyone that's using this operating system has something to hide is, it is a slippery slope for these like authoritarian governments to be um, like penalizing and criminalizing this. So I don't think this is good. But is there anything else you wanted to add?
Just looking through the article here. Yeah, I know that they talk a bit about like the hardware features on the Pixel, but that's not really like super relevant when it comes to protecting your privacy. Because at the end of the day, like those hardware features aren't there to make like the jobs of the police harder. It's to protect your data in a world where there are so many threats that people face every day, and they don't even necessarily know about it, like hacks and in attacks on their devices. And people keep so much information on their phones that using a custom operating system like Graphene OS, especially one like Graphene OS that makes it super easy to install and use without like any Google services or other deep system integrations, it's really important, and it's something that more people should be doing. So to kind of and I think that that is why a lot of groups are trying to stigmatize the use of these operating systems. And so this is something that we need to be vigilant about because um, it's going to be used as an excuse to do all sorts of things against your privacy by a lot of different groups. Um, but anyways, yeah, I think something to be aware of, but that's kind of all I have to say about that.
No, that's some good points you bring up there. It's definitely important that we're staying aware of this sort of thing happening. It's not good to see that that's happening. But I guess now we'll move on to the next story here, and sort of a very last minute article that came out a couple of days ago, and this is from CNBC, and it is that Jack Dorsey launches a WhatsApp messaging rival built on Bluetooth. So if you're not aware, the Twitter, like former Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey, is releasing this new messaging app, decentralized peer-to-peer messaging app that works entirely over Bluetooth mesh networks, with no internet, central servers, phone numbers, or emails required. And the Twitter co-founder announced Sunday that the beta version is live on test flight, with a full white paper available on GitHub. I think it's important to note that this is sort of a personal project and a sort of test of this technology. And I think while it is quite interesting that this is, um, being developed, it's important to note that this is sort of very early in development. It's not like a fully fledged product yet. And there were some concerns brought up by people about the security um, of this new app, and that's sort of what the conversation has been about this specific new app that's been released.
Yeah, I saw an article, I think on TechCrunch, just like yesterday or the day before that, I don't remember, uh, where he basically said that his new secure messenger app has not actually been tested for security. And I know that security researchers have already been looking into potential vulnerabilities with this app. Somebody found that it's possible to impersonate someone else and trick that person's contacts into thinking they're the legitimate target. Um, it kind of has broken authentication verification, according to these researchers. I don't know, um, beyond him saying that it's not been tested yet. I don't know if there's been a response about these particular vulnerabilities, but the vibe that I'm getting from this whole BitChat story so far is that it's kind of like a weekend project that he's working on. And I think it's like it is a very cool concept because I think that communication apps that don't rely on like traditional cellular networks or even the internet for local communications is really important, and we see it used a lot, especially during like protests in countries where they shut down the internet, for example, and people switch to apps like Briar, which has support for local Bluetooth and Wi-Fi connections and other apps like that. Um, And of course, BitChat is also cross-platform and works on iOS, which is a major shortcoming of um, Briar, which is what we traditionally recommend for this specific use case. But as is right now, from what I've seen so far, it doesn't make a lot of sense to start using um, BitChat. And I don't know if there's going to be, I know it's built on, or maybe I'm getting this confused with another messenger. I don't know if this integrates with Nostr or Bitcoin at all, but there's always like the cryptocurrency aspect when it comes to especially stuff that Jack Dorsey is working on. That kind of makes me wary to recommend it necessarily. But it is a cool concept, and it is like a direction that um, would be cool to see other apps go in, or it'd be cool to see this BitChat app improve and maybe fix those security problems and people can use it. Because I think that there is certainly a niche where this would be useful.
Yeah, I definitely think it's an interesting concept, right? But
Yeah.
as it is now, like there are already like really good alternatives like Briar that are available. But it is important to note, like they are taking like the security concerns quite seriously. Like the GitHub has had like a notice saying, you know, don't use this app for like secret communications or private communications. And there has been a response to some of the concerns that were brought up in the GitHub. There are issues that have like been addressed by Jack Dorsey himself. So I mean, it is interesting, but again, like the article says, he spent the weekend building it. So I think you should be a bit careful about trusting this sort of new thing. But it is interesting either way.
Yeah. Uh, Definitely. That's good to know. And we should definitely look into this more later because I think it could go in a good direction, or it could it could not, but we'll see. Um, I think that's everything I have to say about that, though. We can move on to, I think this can be our last article that we cover for this week from what I'm seeing. So we'll look at this article. It was posted on the forum from an Ars Technica article. Samsung and Epic Games call a truce in their App Store lawsuit. Um, so I'll read Kevin's post on our forum here a bit. Epic Games and Samsung has decided to settle a court case over the latter's implementation of Auto Blocker, which is a security feature similar but not as comprehensive as Google's advanced protection and Apple's lockdown mode. In addition to blocking USB-based attacks and link previews, it also prevents the sideloading of third-party apps and stores, which of course the Google Advanced Protection program also does and is a big problem that I have with that. So I'm glad to see that Epic Games and Tim Sweeney are calling it out in Samsung's case, even though um, I don't know how they're addressing that with Google specifically, off the top of my head. Um, but it does sound like Samsung is going to make changes based on this article. So they say, let's see here. They're just kind of speculating at this point. It looks like there aren't specifics about how they're going to make changes, but like I said, it is a big problem that like Google and now Samsung are using security as kind of an excuse to lock down the types of things that you can do with your device, like installing alternative app stores, for example. There's always the flip side, which is that side-loading apps can present a danger when it comes to like installing adware or malware or like things that you not intentionally are installing. But at the same time, like your phone is a device that you own. And so you should be able to make the choice to do things with it that you want to do. And that includes installing alternative app stores like not just Epic Games, but ones like F-Droid or which give you access to a lot of different open source apps or apps that wouldn't normally be distributed through the Play Store or other app stores because of for cost reasons or because of uh, for any number of reasons really that people might not want to support Google's ecosystem and want to distribute their app in a way that's more respectful of like the open source ideals and other stuff that Android has traditionally been good at. So there's always the flip side, but it's tricky. Do you have any thoughts about this?
I guess it's kind of interesting at the moment. Like we're seeing a lot of like these like antitrust like movements being like pushed against a lot of these large companies. So I guess my question would be like, where do we see like Android itself going? Because like if Google like has to sell its like Android to like a third party company, like there's sort of this problem where like Google owns Android and then these companies are also being like licensed to Android at the same time. Where do you see that going?
Yeah, it's tricky, and the Android ecosystem is not in a very good place right now because we also see these stories coming out about like how Pixel specific source code is not being released, and Pixel is switching from like standard Android releases to more of a rolling release model where they kind of are on a separate branch of Android. And it seems like all of this is in response to Google and the potential that they might have to give up the open source project themselves. And so they're kind of trying to lock down anything that they can into their Pixel hardware in case they have to give that up. And I think that that is a big problem, because what we might see in the future, especially because so many Android phone manufacturers have gone out of business, all the major ones like Motorola or LG, their Android divisions have shut down. They're not really making new phones. Um, and we might see a situation where the Android ecosystem that most consumers are familiar with, like with Google Play, are locked down to um, kind of a Google and Samsung duopoly where their kind of like custom forks for Pixel and for Samsung phones are kind of the de facto Android operating systems that most people use, and most people won't be using anything close to the traditional open source project. And that would be pretty bad because I think we'll see a lot fewer feature updates, whether or not Android is split off from Google. We might see a lot less development into the open source side of things and more into the Pixel specific side of things, that they can lock down, um, and keep closed source. So it's a dangerous direction, I think, for Android to be in, and these security features that also lock out other app stores are not helping this either. Um, did that answer your question? I
Yeah, no, I
don't
think
know where I was going with
it's really an interesting like we're in a very interesting time at the moment. Like things are just looking increasingly like confusing about which direction Android itself is actually going to go in, especially with like the recent concerns over like the Android 16 source code. I think this is definitely something we should be keeping an eye on because it could have a impact on the privacy tools that we can use. So it's definitely something to
Yeah,
think about.
I think that like alternative operating systems like um, Graphene OS that we were just talking about earlier, but also the other ones in the Android space, they benefit a lot from Google releasing new feature updates in the Android open source project, so they can kind of take those as well, and Graphene OS can focus on the privacy and security instead of having to keep up with like features that normal consumer phones have, because most of that they get from Android and they can just make improvements from there. If the Android open source project kind of gets abandoned by Google and new features that consumers expect from their phones only makes it into these closed source operating systems, that is going to be a lot of time that custom Android operating system developers have to spend kind of rebuilding from scratch those features because they don't have access to that anymore. That's not the situation yet, of course, it's just speculation, but that is a direction that Android could go in, and it could be pretty bad news for anyone who uses these alternative de-Googled operating systems, because that'll limit adoption of that significantly, I think.
I think also we could also say like that's sort of we've seen the writing on the wall for a while now. Like a lot of the like AOSP like dialer, the AOSP like messaging app, a lot of that's been replaced by Google's own like proprietary apps. So like I feel like this has sort of been something that we've been hoping would never happen, but it's unfortunately looking like things are not going in a direction that we need. So it's unfortunate, but it's the way it is, I guess.
Absolutely. I think that's it for kind of news articles. Were there any topics that you've seen on the forum this week that you think we should take a look at, or should we start wrapping it up here?
I
45
think
minutes in, kind of time flew.
wow, okay, that's yeah, definitely did. I feel like we kind of covered like the AOSP like sort of stuff. That was like a really big topic on the forum this month. So if anyone's interested in like getting into that discussion, there's a lot of good like discussion on the forum about that. So definitely check that out if you're interested.
Yeah, for sure. Um, I think that's everything we wanted to cover for this week, though. So maybe we'll wrap it up here. Thanks for joining us, everyone. All of the updates from This Week in Privacy, we're going to share it. We're going to share links to all of these uh, articles that we talked about on the forum and in the description of this video after it goes live and we change it. So you can check out that thread and get subscribed if you want to stay tuned to that. We're also going to publish these streams as podcasts in the future, so we'll publish information about subscribing to those soon. But of course, this video will be available here on YouTube and on PeerTube. Um, like I said, we haven't done this in quite a while. We're kind of testing out this new format, which is different from the first episodes of the show that we did last year. So we had some technical problems, but we're figuring things out. But if any of you have any feedback about what we can improve or what we should talk about in the next episodes, definitely let us know here in the comments or on our forum or in any of other spaces. Your feedback would be really appreciated. I'd love to know what you liked about the show, what you didn't like, and then we can go from there. Um, I think that is everything, though. Is there anything else you want to add before we end the stream, Jordan?
Yeah, thanks everyone for like sticking with us. Like we're trying our best here. This is like, we're just getting used to this new stream setup. So thanks for all the feedback on the live stream. It really is appreciated. And yeah, looking forward to seeing you next week.
All right, stay tuned, everyone. We will see you later.